ever stopped to think about why your rent might be capped, but the milk you buy has a legal minimum price? Or, why cigarettes are loaded with taxes, but buying an electric car could actually get you a little cash back from the government? These things aren't just random. Nope, they're all the result of government decisions that quietly shape the economy all around us.
And that question right there, why step in on this, but not on that? That's exactly what we're digging into. It's this constant dance between letting markets do their thing and the government stepping in to give a little, or a big, nudge. So let's break down how and why these crucial decisions get made. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to explore why governments even feel the need to get involved in the first place. Then, we'll open up their toolbox, so to speak, and look at the main tools they use. And finally, we'll look at the real-world impact of these actions, both the intended effects and, well, the unintended ones too. Here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with the why, the core reasons for government action. Then we'll jump into how they use money, through taxes and subsidies to influence things. After that, we'll look at more direct methods, like setting price limits. And we'll wrap things up with some of the more subtle ways they guide our choices.
So first up, why even get involved at all, right? Why not just let the market do its thing, hands off?
Well, there are a few big reasons. One of the main ones is to fix what economists call market failures. These are situations where the free market, left to its own devices, just doesn't produce the best result for society. Think about pollution from a factory. The market doesn't automatically account for that cost. Governments also step in to promote fairness, or what we call equity, with things like minimum wage laws. And of course, they need to raise money through taxes to pay for public services like roads and schools. Beyond that, they might also support key industries or provide direct help to families who are struggling. All right, so now that we've got a handle on the why, let's talk about the how. We're going to start with the most common tools in their financial toolkit: taxes and subsidies.
First up, indirect taxes. Now, this isn't like an income tax that comes right out of your paycheck. Nope, this is a tax on stuff you buy. It's added to the price of things like gasoline or tobacco. So you only pay it if you choose to buy that specific item.
And this is where you see the two-for-one punch of these kinds of taxes. On one hand, the government can make something considered harmful, what economists might call a demerit good, like cigarettes, more expensive to try and discourage people from using it. At the very same time, the money raised from that tax can go on to fund things that benefit everyone, like schools or hospitals.
Okay, but here's a really interesting question. Who actually ends up paying for this tax? It's almost never just one side. This is what's called tax incidence, basically who shoulders the burden. As this chart shows, that cost is often split. Part of it gets passed on to you, the consumer, in the form of a higher price. But the producer also feels it because they get to keep less money from each sale.
Now, on the complete flip side, you have subsidies. This is when the government actually gives money to a company. It's basically the opposite of a tax. A great example is if the government gives money to electric car makers. The goal is to help them lower the price, which then encourages more of us to buy them.
But subsidies are definitely a double-edged sword. On one hand, they're great for consumers, right? Lower prices. And they can help important new industries like green energy get off the ground. But that money has to come from somewhere. That's what we call an opportunity cost. It could have been spent on healthcare or education instead. Subsidies can also mess with the natural flow of the market, and sometimes companies can become a little too dependent on that government cash.
Okay, so we've seen how the government uses money to influence things, but what happens when they get a little more direct? That brings us to our next section, setting actual price limits.
You've got two main kinds here. First is a price ceiling. That sets a legal maximum price. Think rent control. It's designed to keep housing affordable for tenants. On the other side, you've got a price floor. That sets a legal minimum price. The classic example is the minimum wage, which is meant to help workers. But, and this is a big but, these controls often have side effects. Ceilings can lead to shortages, and floors can create surpluses.
Let's really think about that for a second. If you cap the rent and keep it artificially low, what happens? Suddenly, way more people want apartments than are actually available. You get a shortage. That means long waiting lists. It can also mean that landlords have less incentive to maintain their buildings. In some cases, it can even lead to illegal black markets, where apartments are rented out for more than the legal limit under the table.
Now let's look at the flip side, the surplus created by a price floor, like the minimum wage. If you set the wage higher than what the market might naturally pay, it can create a surplus of labor. What does that mean? Well, it means more people are lining up for jobs at that higher wage than companies are willing to hire. Unfortunately, that gap can contribute to unemployment for some workers.
All right, for our final section, we're moving beyond just money and prices. We're going to look at two really different ways the government tries to shape behavior: the good old-fashioned rule and the much more subtle nudge.
The command and control approach? It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The government makes a rule, plain and simple. Say, you cannot sell alcohol to anyone under the legal drinking age. Then they set up an agency to monitor and enforce that rule. If you break it, there are penalties. It's direct, it's forceful, there's no ambiguity.
Now, the nudge is a whole different ballgame. It's way more subtle. The idea here is to make it easier for people to make a certain choice without actually taking away their freedom to choose. A classic one is making organ donation the default option on a driver's license application. You can still say no, but you have to actively opt out. Other nudges include those graphic warning labels on cigarette packs, or an electricity bill that shows you how your energy use compares to your neighbors. It's all about guiding behavior gently.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. So what are the big ideas you should really walk away with from all this? First off, remember that governments get involved for specific reasons, usually to fix a problem in the market or to make things a little bit fairer. Their main tools? You've got the financial ones, like taxes and subsidies. You've got direct limits, like price ceilings and floors, which, as we saw, can cause those shortages or surpluses. Then you have the hard and fast rules of regulation versus the soft suggestions of nudges. But, and this is probably the biggest takeaway of all, every single one of these actions has effects you see coming and consequences you might not.
Which leaves us with the big, final question, doesn't it? Knowing that every action has a reaction and that every tool has its own pros and cons, what is the right balance? How much should a government do, and when should it just step back and let things be? Honestly, that's not just a question for economists. It's one of the biggest debates we're all a part of every single day.